Hello, everybody, and welcome to Medicine and Science. My name is Nick Palavito. I'll be your moderator today. And today we're going to look at misinformation and new laws relating to that. And with that, we're going to bring up quickly Dr. Michael Patmos, who can give us some ideas about what's going on with these new laws. So, Dr. Michael, take it away. I'm going to fix my mic.
Good morning, Nick. Again, thank you for the opportunity to appear, and thank you to your audience for their attention. I am a board-certified internal medicine doctor with added qualifications in infection control and hospital epidemiology. I have two quick points to make today. The first one is a follow-up on the discussion last week about Tenet Media, the Department of Justice indictment of two Russian agents working at US-based Tenet Media as editors under a cover of alias, and some of the programmers associated with Tenet Media, Dave Rubin, Benny Johnson, and Tim Pool. These are very popular podcasters with active channels on YouTube. They have millions of viewers, and they were being paid by Tenet Media to produce programming. And Tenet Media was in turn paid by Russia. And so why were these podcasters being supported indirectly and probably unwittingly by Russia? It's because they have content that aligns with Russian interests. Well, it occurred to me that there is a lot of programming on those podcasts that has to do with COVID and vaccines. So I went through all of the old programs of Dave Rubin and Tim Pool and Benny Johnson, and I found lots of times when anti-vax physicians have appeared on their programs. One in particular, multiple times. So I took that program, that YouTube link with the doctor appearing on this program, Dave Rubin, tied to Tenet Media, tied to Russia, and I posted it on LinkedIn. Said, isn't this interesting? It didn't take but a day before that post was taken down by LinkedIn, and I was notified by LinkedIn that I was under review for posting misinformation. I appealed it, and I thought I was going to get deplatformed. And then several days later, LinkedIn wrote back and said, no, your post is nothing. You just shared a link, from a podcast with a doctor who claims to be an expert. And so the link was reinstated, and I did not get deplatformed. But I think it's interesting because what it says is that anti-vax physicians have appeared on these Tenet Media supported programs on YouTube, saying things that are anti-vax, anti-vaccine, and pro-COVID and anti-vaccine, and this Tenet Media and these podcasters have been linked to Russia through Russian editors who work at Tenet and supported by Russian dollars. These podcasters on YouTube, Rubin, Johnson, and Pool, were paid $100,000 a week to produce these segments. So my question was, have the physicians who've appeared on these programs benefited financially with Russian money? I didn't ask that on LinkedIn, but that's obviously, the question. So why wouldn't these doctors why would they want this taken down? Because they don't want anybody probing deeper to see whether they were paid ultimately by Russia. So with that, I'll move on to today's topic. Today's topic is something that is very exciting. I'm really happy to report this. Assemblyman Dr. Herb Conaway in New Jersey has introduced a bill into the New Jersey legislature, A1884. This bill would criminalize the intentional dissemination of misinformation and disinformation. This is so crucial and so important. I am 100% behind this. I called just this morning the office of Dr. Conaway, Assemblyman Dr. Herb Conaway in New Jersey, as well as the co-sponsors of the bill, Sterling Shanley and Shanique Spate. And I spoke with two of their offices and left a message for the third one that I am strongly supportive of this bill. This is crucial because right now there is no one holding these physicians and others who disseminate misinformation and disinformation. There's no one holding them accountable. They're hiding under cover of the First Amendment. So basically what we have now is we have a situation where a doctor can go on Fox News or social media or ABC News, whatever channel they want, and say, hi, I'm Dr. So-and-so. I'm an expert. And I recommend that you not be vaccinated, or I recommend that you not treat tuberculosis, or I recommend that you not treat your HIV, or I recommend that you not get rabies prophylaxis. As outrageous as those things may seem, a doctor could do that and have no culpability or accountability at all. Blatantly false, wrong information could be put out, and the doctor say, well, that's my, First Amendment right to spout whatever I want. As long as it's not in the context of a physician-patient relationship, the medical board won't touch it. And they'll say, that's, matter of freedom of speech. No, it's not. It's unprofessional conduct. And it meets the test for unprofessional conduct. Who would agree that it's professional for a doctor to get on TV and advocate against treatment of a disease we know needs to be treated? So this bill, New Jersey Assembly Bill 1884, would criminalize this activity. And I'm so excited about this bill. I hope it gets into committee and will be heard in committee. And I would encourage everyone who's concerned about misinformation to contact the New Jersey legislative offices of Dr. Herb Conaway and offer support for this bill. The committee that it will go before is Health Professions Committee, and the chairman of that committee is Assemblyman Sterly, Sterly, Shanley, Shanley. And I would urge that he allowed this bill to be brought and heard. I have said I am born in New Jersey. I will travel from Maui back to New Jersey to testify on behalf of this bill. It is so crucially needed. Why? Because 1.2 million Americans died of COVID. More Americans died of COVID than every war we were ever in combat, including the Revolutionary War. Of the 1.2 million Americans who died, 300,000 to 400,000 died needlessly because they refused to be vaccinated. That data came from the Commonwealth Fund, was well published, high quality data reported extensively on NPR. 300,000 to 400,000 Americans died needlessly because they refused to be vaccinated. Why? Because they got misinformation from experts on TV. So in addition to criminalizing this kind of deadly misinformation, we also need to extend, and I would add that this bill needs an amendment, we also need to extend that physicians who misrepresent or lie about their credentials on TV and in the public space in order to establish what they appear to be as experts so that they can disseminate with authority misinformation, that needs to be criminalized as well. The leading proponents, physician proponents of COVID misinformation are frauds. Their CVs are full of false claims of faculty appointments, directorships that do not exist. They have exaggerated and embellished and falsified credentials, and no one has held them accountable for this. So I would argue that we need not only to criminalize disinformation, but we also need to criminalize the deliberate falsification of credentials presented in the public space to lend an air of credibility to someone who is a fraud and unqualified. Finally, you might ask, well, who's to judge what's misinformation? I mean, who's the arbiter of this? That's easy. It's easy. How do you think doctors teaching resident physicians and interns and medical students, how do you think we know what to tell them? How does a doctor, if I'm at the bedside with an intern discussing the treatment of a disease, how do I know what the correct information is? It's not difficult. You go to UpToDate. UpToDate has all the literature. It tells you exactly what the current literature says, how to work it up, how to treat it, and it's all addressed with the current best evidence. If there is controversy and it's not known, UpToDate will say, we don't have good information on this one. But for things like how to prevent COVID, we know what the data says. So it's not hard to judge what is misinformation and what is correct information. It's right there in the medical literature. Ask any professor, anybody who teaches doctors for a living, how do you know what to teach? We go to UpToDate. We go to the literature. It's right there. So This bill must get through. New Jersey is leading the way. As a former born and raised in New Jersey, I am so proud of that state for getting it right this time. And I hope this bill gets through and is signed into law and it becomes a model for the rest of the nation. It is high time that we shut down these doctors who are and underqualified, who are profiteering off of misinformation and dead bodies. And then they sell antidotes or they sell a cure. They're grifters and they need to be criminalized. That's my comments for today, and happy to start this.
Well, yeah.
Here's what happens if you try to take matters into your own hands. There is a Twitter feed called, well, I'm not going to give the whole name because I don't want to get sued, but a woman named Erin Elizabeth, who is the partner of Dr. Joseph Mercola, who are two of the disinformation, they've been called the disinformation dozen for spreading COVID misinformation. And I didn't know who she was, and I saw one of her tweets, and I tweeted back, "This seems like garbage." And she immediately tweeted at me saying, shut up or I'm taking you to court.
Yep.
And, I don't want to get sued. So I looked her up. And she does take people to court. And her partner, her semi-husband, is this doctor who has made $100 million, $1/10 of $1 billion, selling garbage. So she has the money to sue everybody who says anything bad about her.
That's exactly right, Rick. That's why it needs to be criminalized. The individual who tries to fight against these folks is going to get slammed by these slap lawsuits. It's called, I think, strategic litigation against public participation. A lawsuit to make you shut up, make you spend your money on lawyers. You won't lose, but you'll spend all your money, so you just shut up. It has to be. This needs a legislative solution. You're absolutely right. And Dr. McCall is quite famous. He's a family doctor, a doctor of osteopathy, family physician who has amassed a $100 million fortune in the alternative healthcare business, selling vitamins and herbs, and he's obviously advocates against vaccination, and it's better to buy his products than it is to get the COVID vaccine. And he's amassed a fortune. I got to tell you, people always say, "Well, doctors make a lot of money." Well, doctors do pretty well, but doctors don't make that kind of money. A family physician working 80 hours a week is going to be
doesn't make
$200,000 a year. It's about what you're going to make. You can't become, you can't build up your net worth to over $100 million as a family physician. That's why these doctors do this. There is money to be made here, and this has to be addressed legislatively. It cannot be addressed one-on-one in the courts, and it cannot be addressed in a marketing or educate. We're just going to educate everybody. They have such great communication abilities and tools. They have social media now. Social media, they don't care what they publish. So that's an uphill battle. We'll never win that. The only way to deal with this is legislatively.
But there's been good news about it. Somebody else who made $1 billion selling questionable supplements, Alex Jones and his media empire. It's been ruled that it has to be sold off to pay the Sandy Hook victims that he defamed over a period of so many years.
Oh, well, Dr. Patmos, maybe we should start our own medical supplement program that people can buy. I have some snake oil that will cure everything, and it's only $100 a bottle. And it may not have much snake oil in it, but it may not cure anybody. But hey, freedom of speech, right, and innovation. That was the response that I saw on the internet. Freedom of speech and innovation. Okay, you do have freedom of speech and you do have right to innovate, but in the legal profession, you cannot hold a professional license. Okay, so if these people want to drop their professional licenses, they can say anything they want. By the way, in the securities area, which my business partner works in, they have to have what they say cleared through their broker dealer. They cannot do misleading and misrepresenting statements. Okay, which is one reason you will not see on the Pod TV network a lot of people from the securities industry. You'll see people talking about stocks because we have modern investing, which you know, Rick, and we have Wall Street hackers. None of those people are securities licensed. My partners and all the people with securities license, I asked to come on, they go, we can't. Why not? What we say has to be cleared through our broker dealer, or we have to give up our license. So it's real simple. If these doctors want to have their freedom of speech and say whatever they want, just give up your medical license. That's all.
So I've got a question for Dr. Patmos about vitamins. So I buy my vitamins now, but a lot of vitamins, don't, I don't know which ones do anything and which ones don't. Probably most of them don't confer any health benefits, but I'm a hypochondriac. But I buy from Vitacost for the most part, which they have cheap vitamins. And, I've been told that all vitamins pretty much come from just a few wholesalers. So if you're going to buy vitamins, you might as well buy them for as cheaply as possible, because the specialized, super expensive ones come from the same source, and they just have a fancy label on them.
Rick, that's a great question. It's funny. I reflect back on how I got interested in quackery 50 years ago as a medical student. It was around vitamins and herbs. And that was when the whole explosion of vitamin quackery became very popular back in the 70s. And so vitamins are elements, vital amines that are known to be required for health. The first one that was recognized was vitamin C. It was identified because in the 1700s, in 1600s, sailors would travel, for years across the seas as explorers, and they didn't have any fresh fruit, so they didn't have vitamin C. They got scurvy, and it was found that by giving them fruit could cure their scurvy. So that was the first recognition that vitamins are essential, and vitamins are essential. But here's the thing: if you have a good diet with well-balanced diet with vegetables and fruit and so forth, you'll get all the vitamins you need from your diet. The idea that you have to supplement vitamins has never really been supported. There are people who don't have a good diet. There are people who are deficient in vitamin B12 for some other reason, or maybe iron deficient for another reason. That's not a vitamin, it's a metal. But there are some examples where people do need to supplement, but the vast majority of vitamin and nutritional supplements are just very expensive urine. That's really what you're getting, is very expensive urine, because that's where it goes. If you have excess, unless it's a fat soluble vitamin, it's going to get urinated out. If it's fat soluble, it's going to get in your liver, and people end up getting sick, like a recent case of vitamin D poisoning from over ingestion of vitamin D. So, vitamins can play a role. It all depends on the situation. If you're there's probably no harm in taking a 1-a-day multivitamin, sort of to be sure. I wouldn't take more than that, and just get the cheapest one out there. I have a bottle of vitamins, and I remember I take one, but my diet is very good. I have a very well-balanced diet, and so I don't have any vitamin deficiencies. But having said that, sometimes just with age alone, even if you have a good diet, you can become B12 deficient because your body can't absorb B12. So there are some situations where vitamin supplementation is needed, but the vast majority of that is just silliness. And, Dr. Mercola, that's where he really earned his wealth, is in selling vitamins and supplements. He's in the vitamin supplement business. It's a very lucrative business. Companies like Herbalife, for example, have made a fortune in it. So it's a very lucrative business, the supplement business. And now the COVID anti-vax folks have kind of merged in with that same thing, and they're using COVID as a way to sell Spike Detox and Spike Cleanse and all these other herbals and supplements designed to get rid of the vaccine from your body because it's toxic.
Yeah, when I was reading about the misinformation, Dr. Patmos, one of your colleagues was adamant that this is horrible, that they should be allowed to continue to do misinformation because misinformation is innovative. What are your thoughts about how does misinformation become innovative? I don't get it. So
that's a great question, Nick. Thank you for asking that. Yeah, what that doctor is saying is that we have to preserve the right of the physician down the street to do innovative exploration of treatment. Oh my God, no. This isn't 1888 anymore. You don't want your doctor on the corner or your GP down the street experimenting on you, looking for innovative exploration. No, That's called research. And if you're going to do research, it has to be done in a controlled manner, in a structured way, under the supervision of an institutional review board to monitor for safety of the people enrolled in the study. This is done in academic medical centers. It's structured, it's under IRB review and supervision, has to be approved and monitored for safety very carefully. You can't tell a local doctor down the street, oh yeah, just explore and innovate and make up your own treatments and try it out on your patients. Who would advocate for that? But they need to advocate, because that's how that's the protection. They're saying we're just looking for new solutions. No, they're not. They're experimenting on people for profit, and they're doing it without institutional review board oversight. Research needs to be done in research settings where it's done properly, not at your local doctor's office down the road with no control group and no placebo and no protection for the patient.
Well, let's talk about doing your own research and the First Amendment, where First Amendment people say, well, okay, so there's BS out there. Well, just like do your own research and figure it out. But there are the main thing that works against this. There's a couple names for it. One is the Gish Gallup, named after a guy named Gish, who is a creationist who would go on shows and just say so many different lies in a short period of time that you can't swat them all away. It's also called the Russian fire hose of misinformation model, where you hit people with so much BS that people are overwhelmed and they can't counter all the BS, and they end up believing some of it.
Yeah, but the problem I have is they're in the legal profession, for example, Rick. There is an ethical code that you cannot, speak adverse against the legal profession. In other words, as an attorney, if you want to keep your license, you can't just get on TV and say how bad the legal profession is, how great I am, blah, 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 blah. Your freedom of speech as an attorney, as well as a securities broker, is limited because you're carrying professional licenses. And the freedom of speech arguments failed against it because you still have freedom of speech. You just need to surrender your license. Once you have a license to practice, you're held to a higher standard of care when it comes to what you're talking about. And so when I looked at this law, I'm going, this is normal in securities brokers, because everybody hated their stockbroker for years, but over the last 40 years, they've reined them all in through FINRA. I mean, I watched it for the last 40 years, FINRA, the SEC, because they're not allowed to misrepresent the securities to you, or basically they lose their license. All right, now they're going to apply the same standard to medical doctors. What's wrong with that? Okay, if you're going to intentionally misrepresent things to the general public, you lose your license. You can still misrepresent to the public, but you cannot be a medical doctor and misrepresent to the public.
So if you want to see a good movie about financial misrepresentation, if you haven't already seen it, The Wolf of Wall Street with Margot Robbie, it's about the business of
Jordan Buffett. Yeah. Right. And by the way, that was the securities industry when I got involved in it 40 years ago. I was only securities licensed for 1 year because they had a rule that if you're a lawyer and your securities license, you gave up your ability to invoke attorney-client privilege. Okay, so I had to make a choice, and I kept my law license, dropped the securities license. So like I said, there is no freedom of speech issue here in the New Jersey legislation. They can still have freedom of speech, but they just can't say, I'm a medical doctor licensed to practice in X, and now I'm going to, deliver misinformation. No, they're going to have to say, I'm not a medical doctor, but I'm going to deliver misinformation. You're free to do that.
You made another great point, Nick. You talked about the fact that a lawyer can't impugn the legal profession. Well, what these anti-vax doctors do is they tell their followers that the medical profession is corrupt.
I saw that.
the whole medical profession is corrupt, and they're all in bed with big pharma. And I get comments, people, accusing me of being a terrible human being because I'm a doctor and I'm not an anti-vaxxer. So I must be corrupt. I'm being paid by big pharma. I'm a shill. I never got a penny from big pharma. And they've not only eroded confidence in the medical profession, they've eroded trust and confidence in the FDA, CDC, federal government, public health officials. They have destroyed trust and confidence.
That's the reason they have that ethics law in the bar associations, American Bar Association. And even though ethics law differ from state to state, the general rule is you cannot banish the legal profession and say this is a horrible profession, everybody here is a crook, blah blah blah. You can do it, but you have to surrender your legal license first. Then you can do it, say whatever you want.
We need to do the same thing.
So for me, it makes sense. To me, this law makes sense. I'm kind of shocked that it isn't passed already in all the states, because the thing is, what they did is they did something that the legal profession would hate to do, is they made people feel uncomfortable about the standard medical practice, because you have a couple guys out there who just say whatever they want and think they can say whatever they want. And I agree they can, because we do have freedom of speech, but they can't say whatever they want and be a medical doctor at the same time.
So interestingly, in California, a very courageous physician, Dr. Nick Sawyer, who's an ER physician at University of California, Davis, started a thing called no license for disinformation. He got a law passed in California that would actually result in the California Medical Board taking away a doctor's license for spreading disinformation. Well, that got pushed back, and a legal team funded by the GOP and Trump's lawyers went after that bill, went after Nick Sawyer, went and actually got that bill, the Governor Newsom, that bill was rejected. It was signed into law and then repealed because of this. And the California Medical Board gave in because they don't have the financial resources to withstand the onslaught of litigation that would come if they tried to take away a doctor's license. So the medical board is powerless to do anything about this. This requires a legislative solution at a higher level than just the medical board.
That's amazing.
Republican states won't do, like Florida, for instance, has a quack as its Surgeon General.
Oh, Lobato or whatever his name is. I think I'm just not sure about his competency. In other words, because he does opine in areas he really doesn't have any expertise on, and he's supposed to be the Florida Surgeon General. And also, one real problem, if you want to look at a real problem, is the political influence that's being placed upon a Surgeon General in a state. And that to me is really a problem, because losing their.
Dr. Patmos mentioned about 400,000 people who died needlessly from vax refusal. About 60,000 of them are in Florida. Florida is
because you have an older population, and the real problem, Rick, is when, and Dr. Patmos knows this, when people start yammering all the time about how dangerous it is to take a vaccine, you start getting in your head, well, maybe I shouldn't take the vaccine. And that's the real problem, is what they're doing is they're creating a major league disservice to a lot of people. And as you get older, you go, well, maybe I don't need the vaccine. And then you get the disease and you die.
So of the 1.2, and I'd say it's more like 1.4 million Americans who died of COVID, 1 million of them are grandmas and grandpas, are seniors. Right. And then there are a-holes who argue, well, okay, they were old anyway. So but that's a crap argument. The average years of life, according to actuaries, lost by somebody who dies of COVID, including all these seniors, is 10 years. So somebody who is 73 dies of COVID, that person might have lived another 12 years, and the grandkids could have gotten another 12 years.
But watch, you're gonna see some changes in this industry, because ultimately they're going to have to pass these regulations. And with that, we'd like to thank Dr. Patmos, board certified in internal medicine and has a specialty in infectious disease, an area that I don't know very much about, and Rick Rosner, member of the High IQ Society. I don't know much about that either, Rick.
Neither do I.
We want
It just means you're desperate to have something going for you.
and we'll see you next week on Medicine and Science on the Pod TV network. Take care. Bye-bye.